Hey, this is Barney from Powerhoof. Our game Crawl is finally releasing pretty soon, and now that the pressure's off to get everything done, I've finally got some time to do some just fun behind-the-scenes stuff. So I thought the most kind of interesting thing I've done recently has been this, animating this scene. I've got the Minotaur in the back, Knight, 3 Hydra heads, hero, and the Crawl title. I thought I'd just go through the process. It's a lot more high res than all the stuff I've been doing on Crawl, all the gameplay stuff, obviously, which is why I kind of wanted to do it. The first thing that I did was this really crappy doodle. Not really about getting details to look great, but just about figuring out the composition. So next was, alright, I scaled it down to my target resolution. I chucked on just the basic colors, just very rough, but obviously this color scheme in general is pretty hideous. I started messing with a bunch of different colors, putting in, I think, look at this mess of junk that I did. So, hue saturation layers. So next was just a bit more tweaking on the Knight. Here we go, more squishing on the Knight. That back dragon head, middle dragon head. So that's pretty much what I wound up with. I came back later and thought, I'd like to animate this. So the first thing was obviously to just break everything up into separate layers. So I'd see if I'm cutting this guy out. So he's kind of in front of everything. So he's one of the things I'd choose to do first. I'd select a bit bigger than him and just go through and just go and push these right up to his border. All right, so I'd select him, cut him, and then on this behind layer, so that I'm not actually messing up any of the existing pixels, I just go and draw in his spot using the color picker a lot to pick the colors around to match them. So yeah, I'm just doing this with a sort of big round brush, doing it pretty roughly, but so get the general idea, and then I choose another guy. And same process again, and I just do this until I had everything cut out. This leg was coming out something like this. Next I actually did the hero. I don't have any of the process saved, I've just got this finished thing. Then after that I got to work on the Hydra, and fortunately I did save some of the work in progress Hydra stuff. The first thing I did was this guard to show me the areas that were going to be used up by the other Hydra heads, not to animate him over there, and not to bring any important details down here. Then I had a process basically of breaking this guy up into layers. There's a trick that I'll do a little demo of. So say you've got a head. Oh, sorry, I've got a cat complaining. Just a sec. Get out of here. So, as long as he's just sort of moving up and down, I can basically keep those same layers and get different poses just by moving those. Yeah, it's a pretty sort of lazy way of kind of rotating something kind of up and down along that same axis. And so because I knew that I was only sort of really going to move him very much within that, but not enough that he need to be sort of massively redrawn, that just having a bunch of wedges that can sort of be shifted around like this was all I was likely to need. What I did is very similar to when I was cutting out all the different characters. I just cut off the tip of his nose and then sort of painted in the background of what would be behind that. Then I cut off another layer, just painted in some rough background that would be behind that. Cut off another layer, cut off another layer, cut off his eyes, and these are very roughly just painted in behind because I know they're not going to be seen very much. As an example now, I can get a feeling of rotating him. Take his head down a little bit. And so now his whole head has seemed to sort of rotate a bit, but I haven't had to do any really complicated redrawing because this layer is all one layer. They're not actually rotating to match. And so, you know, with things like that, I would end up just sort of grabbing details and rotating them in Photoshop to kind of line up. I'm happy to leave the pixels getting jaggy and looking silly just from doing rough, quick rotations. I definitely think you're better off being less constrained as you're designing the movement and letting things get ugly, and then worrying about making them look nice later on once the movement's good. But so having him broken up like that kind of really allowed me to play around and get animating him a bit more like a sort of a puppet without me having to redraw every time I had a new pose. And so I can sort of get the movement how I like it with him just broken into layers, and then I can go back and start actually redrawing things. So the very first thing I would have done was just these two poses, and then just make nice little cushioning frames onto each of these. And so this frame was made basically as a copy of this frame, but I just tried to put a little bit of weight into it. And then this one is a copy of this frame with a little bit of weight. Okay, so I thought I'd do just a little example here showing sort of the basic principle for putting physicality in animation. If you're new and you're learning, this might be useful. So the core principle in animation is you're trying to get object from position 1 to position 2, as I'm doing in the dragon head. And the natural instinct is to draw a position that's just halfway between those. And that's definitely the starting point for what you want to do, but it's not the complete answer. So if I have position 1 here, position 2 here, and we take this to be my position 1.5, the end result of just drawing position 1.5 that's halfway between is this. We get a thing sliding in a very neat and smooth way. And so I guess your main goal when you're designing this 1.5 position is to think, how can this halfway between position communicate anything about the physical properties of the object that's moving? And so if this was some piece of machinery that was moved in a straight line with the same amount of force behind it the whole time, I would leave this 1.5 position as is and just have it move in that hard straight line. But generally, you wind up animating a lot of organic things. And organic things are built up of, obviously, a lot of parts, and some parts are heavy, and some parts are soft, some parts are squishy, some parts are light, and some parts have intentional force applied towards them by the muscles, and then some other parts are just being dragged along behind those forceful parts. And so the 1.5 I would actually tend to draw will be something where, so in order to communicate that the head is the thing that's being forcefully moved by the muscles, it's sort of where the weight is being put, I'd draw this almost all the way into the target position. So if I'm saying this is my halfway point, but at the halfway point that's already been moved basically the whole way, then that's saying already that this has a lot of force being put into it. And then the nose, I would move it not as far as halfway. I would keep that kind of closer to the original, maybe even sort of bend that up a little as if it's flopping. And so that is a way of, just in this one image, communicating that this is forceful and this is a bit floppy and is being dragged along behind. And so now you can see already, just moving between those, just with one frame, you can see this here is being yanked down by force, but this is flopping behind. So generally my process will be, I do that one breakdown position that communicates the most about this thing. You might have ears, and then the ears might flop as well. Then it's a matter of doing halfways between 1 and 1.5 and doing halfways between 1.5 and 2. An obvious halfway here would be like that. So this would be a mechanical halfway. The message that it's sending about the physicality of the object is the same message that's already been sent here. It's already been told, this is floppy, this is how this works. And so this isn't really adding much to the physicality of the object or much to the information that the animation's giving you about the physicality of the object. It's just adding smoothness to the animation. So what I like to do wherever possible is to think, well, now that I've got that breakdown showing some physicality, if I want to make the one that's halfway between this and that, how would I communicate even more about the physicality? So if we started by kind of bringing the head back instead of moving it downwards, we flop those ears back towards where they're coming from to communicate very clearly, these are light, these are flopping, they're just being dragged behind. Tilt the nose up a little bit, but keep it sort of quite similar. But so this is now putting more information in there than what was already in the green, because it's sort of, the green is an example of, if this thing moves down, look at the forces that happen to these things. But the blue is now an example of, if it moves back, here's an example of the way they react from a different type of movement. And so now I have kind of more points for your brain to feed on and gain the information of how heavy things are. So how can I tell more of a story than just going halfway between these points? Firstly, I'd squish his head outward. Now the ears are going from here to here and from here to here, but so if I make them so floppy that they actually overshoot that, and so they squish right down as well, and then the nose will also squish. There we go. So that's communicating a little more about the fact that the head has firmly hit some sort of change in force. So yeah, that's my little example. So now I'll get back to the Hydra. And so this is still basically the same thing. Over on the side here, I've flattened all those layers. I just collapsed each layer into a new frame, and so that's a point where I've lost control of all those little slices now, so I have to be pretty confident that the general kind of movement is what I like, because if I then change my mind, it's a lot harder to kind of rejig things without him broken into those layers. But you can see here that I've been able to now go and sort of draw things like his eye blinking, that obviously don't happen with just using the same layers. I've got his ears flopping a little bit behind, and so when that frame hits there, the ear is sort of curving up. Then the ear flops down. So I fiddled with the flopping stuff a bit more. Gave him a bit more sort of bounce at the bottom here. Went in and drew a little thing with his mouth opening. And that was done very, very simply just by literally lassoing this, bottom part of his face and shifting it down on those frames and then drawing in the mouth behind it. This is the final one now, where I've got some blink happening at the same time as the nostril and a bit of the head moving along with it. And I think that's basically his final animation for this. Then obviously onto the next guy. Once again, I've just got a big cutout showing kind of where the hero is going to take up space, where the title is going to take up space, and where the other dragons are going to take up space. And he's the same as the other guy. He's been sliced up into a bunch of layers, and obviously his neck is cut into slices. And the first thing I did, same again, just make 2 poses to move between. Same process as before, obviously. I wound up with this sort of 12 frame idol. So this is where I flattened him all into layers so that I could start to do things like, squishing his eyes closed, flopping the tips of the ears. I kind of slowed things down from just this fast bobbing between 2 positions, and I took him so he'd come into a position and he'd actually hold it for a little while before moving off to the next. I think I gave a bit of a stall sort of here in the middle as well, and then really made him hold in this position for quite a few frames. And obviously the same thing that I did with the other guy, took some frames, grabbed his jaw, moved it down, and I think this was the final one for this guy. Just a little bit more movement into this kind of facial stuff, into his nose scowling, just so it kind of wobbles a little bit instead of sort of moving into that pose and just being static. This guy, unfortunately, I didn't save any of the steps for, and he was definitely the most complicated, but he was still done in pretty much the same way. Made 2 positions to move between, and then put a position halfway between them with some flop, and then I started sort of seeing where I wanted to stall in one position for longer and things like that, and grabbing his jaw and moving that down to get that animating. I mean, you can still make out on his back the kind of individual layers kind of moving separately, And the knight was the same thing again. Just got him cut into pieces and squishing between a couple of positions. So once I had him moving, though, there was one extra element, which was his cape, which I wanted to be flapping. And so I started by just animating just a simple line. And so the technique for that is pretty simple. Say if I've got a line, basically the wind will cause it to have, say, a wobble. And that wobble will basically move down towards the tip. The wobble's there, and then the wobble's there, then the wobble's there, and maybe the wobble's just coming off the edge. And so now if I traced over that, you get the idea. It's basically just a bit of a lump just moving down towards the tip, and then another lump will come and move towards the tip. And so there's sort of a bit here where there's a bit of extra sort of flappiness in the middle where I like the concept, but I don't think I actually animated it particularly well, that little bit of extra flicker. The next step after getting that line away that I'd like it is to turn that into a sheet. And so all this is say that line again, and I just grab that line, shift it up here, and now I have a sheet or a ribbon, and you can see the the pretty simple 3D structure of that. And so that's literally all I did. Once I was happy with that, I just kind of made a copy of it, shifted it up, connected it through to make it into a 3D kind of thingy. And I've got a highlight kind of traveling down, just catching on the sort of tips of these bumps. Looking at his original design here, obviously it's not just this boring flat ribbon. He's got these nice chunks eaten out. And so my next step was I basically painted on every frame where I thought these chunks would go, but I did that without messing with the actual ribbon underneath, so that I could play it through, see, oh no, it's in the wrong position, that frame, and reposition it without having actually destroyed my ribbon. And so once I was happy with them, this is the end result where I'd actually gone and erased them out of the chunk. And I also did, you can see I also did one on the tip here to turn that into a tear. I'll just go back. And so that one was pretty simple as well. It was the same sort of philosophy, you know, just kind of drawing that every frame. Maybe came up here. I can't remember exactly how long it was, but you know, something like that. You get the idea, and so I can kind of have a look and see if that is the kind of the size that I want it to be, and if it's sitting right against the fabric. And then once I'm happy with it, then I can go and actually erase that. And this is the final, just with a bit of extra cleanup, a few little details tweaked. Yeah, that's basically it. This is the available space for him. These are the positions that I had. This guy's a little bit different because he's doing more like a run. And so the positions between these, I kept these both low to the ground, but one's left, one's right, and then the positions in between, he's going between them, but he's lifting up. And so that's just to get this kind of movement, the minimum amount of frames to get something like a running action. That was all done with not redrawing him for any of the frames. It's just I've sliced him up into all these layers, just shifting these around the final Minotaur. His ears, I've gone and just sort of hand animated some flopping. I can sort of see how it sits. So I had the background, hero on there, Hydra, in the night, and then the Minotaur. Then I got the title, animated the color in the title a little bit. Yeah, and so that was quite a bit of work for something that shows up in the trailer for a very short period of time, but it was fun. Oh yeah, actually, once I got them into this scene together though, I did do a bit more animating. So you can see on the night, you can see the lighting actually sort of coming in and out on his face there, or say over here, this shadow kind of growing. So once I had them in the scene together, I just added extra little details like that, like just the light kind of throbbing back and forth on a lot of the shadowy details. So this guy, you can see on his chest plate thingies there, the light just sort of coming in and out. And on the side here, I've got a parallax effect that I did in Premiere Pro. Yeah, but so anyway, so that was all that work for one, say 10-second shot of zooming in on this, but it was fun, and yeah, it was cool to share some of that stuff. Hopefully it's interesting to someone who's got a similar a bit of animating they want to do. So yeah, thanks for watching. I'm Barney from Powerhoof, and our game Crawl is coming out real soon. So buy 200 copies of it, maybe. Anyway, thanks.